Welcome to Conversations Through Alzheimer's. I'm Amber Marty.
And I'm Felicia Wood. We're sisters and daughters of Rosemary Marty, diagnosed with Alzheimer's in June of 2025.
We're documenting her journey as it happens, and we're sharing every resource we find along the way.
This is her story.
And ours. Thanks for joining us for week 3 of getting to the diagnosis. Today, we're going to be going back to beginning of April, where we were talking with my dad about how her symptoms have just gotten to a point to where we need to take her to at least a PCP to discuss next steps on what this could possibly be. After that initial phone call, my mom went back to Denver, and my he did take it seriously. He talked to the PCP. This was on April 14th. Him and my mom went in there. They said that they went in there for an evaluation of cognitive issues. My dad reported forgetfulness. My mom usually does the taxes every year, and I don't know exactly what happened. I don't know if she forgot to do the taxes or couldn't figure out how to use, I think they were using TurboTax or at the time or something. There was some big ordeal with the taxes that even my dad was like, wow, something is going on. And so he brought that up to the PCP. And I think he probably took the list that we told him of all the things that we found in Plattsburgh, and he did agree that probably a neuropsych eval was the next step and a referral to a neurologist.
That was probably one of the biggest wins that we got at that point, because it had been over 3 or 4 months of just thinking that this was depression related, anxiety related. And I think that concrete list of things that were happening was very helpful for the doctor to say, okay, maybe there is something more going on now. And so that coming in with that very concrete list is what I think really secured that neuropsych evaluation, which still took, I think from the time that was recommended, it was another 6 weeks out. So again, it's just something that we've learned along the way is you really have to stay on top of as many appointments as you can and communicating as you can, because sometimes I would say that 6 weeks is maybe even the shorter side wait for all of this. So we were really glad that she could get in for that appointment when she could, which ended up being at the end of May.
So after my mom went back to Denver, I went back to Orlando. I did have a trip planned for me to go to Denver in May. It was going to be for 2 weeks. I'm lucky enough to work remote, so I decided to take off 1 week for PTO, and then I was going to work remote the second week. And the first week, I really wanted to help my mom, because at this point, I didn't know it was Alzheimer's. I just knew maybe it was ADHD. Maybe she just had some organization lacking skills. Her room was just she's always, every time we call her, oh, I'm cleaning my room. But we knew that she didn't have the skills to actually organize. And that's something that I thrive at. And so I wanted to take a week. I wanted to go through she had boxes of papers that she'd saved since literally the 70s. And I was like, I'm going to sit here for days and scan them in, put them on her computer file. I'm going to tell her she needs to get rid of her printer because she prints out everything. I was like, we need to get her up to this century. And it was so interesting. A lot of things that came out of this, in hindsight, I feel bad that I kind of pushed her to her limit, not knowing that she had Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
And one of those things.
It was really interesting because she was very emotional that week that you were working, way more than we've ever seen her before. Cause it's not like this came out of the blue, right? We've always taken, every couple of years we go and we help her organize. So but this time it was very different.
Yeah. Well, and it seemed like she was just more and maybe it's that emotional piece, but more attached to everything. She's not a hoarder by any means, but she does not like to get rid of things. And I told her, I was kind of strict with her. I was like, Mom, you are welcome to keep everything as long as it has a home and a purpose. If it doesn't, you can't just keep everything just because you want to keep it. There's not enough space in this house. Your other option is going and buying a bigger house, but that's not a real option right now. So we have to get rid of some things. And it was little things, little toy, light up rings. I'm like, why do you need this? Oh, well, I might give it to so-and-so one day. And, we're just very, millennials in general, of me and you have talked about, are very minimalistic people. So the idea of just keeping little toy things and whatever, I was when things are just stacking up is very different concept. And I tried to be empathetic towards different people, have different views on things, but
I really think that from your perspective at that time, you were very committed to simplifying her life.
Yeah,
you
exactly.
Maybe some of the things that she's going through is because
she can't find things.
She is so disorganized. She's wasting time. She had said, I want to know where these things are. And then again, in hindsight, that's again the Alzheimer's. She couldn't keep track of where things were. We didn't know it was because of
Mhm.
at that point of what the neuropsych evaluation reveal. At that point, we just thought we got to get her more organized. And you know, even think back to I think we've said this piece about our mom over the years. It's like there was a period of time where like she was very tech savvy, and
Yeah.
so we really thought like if we help simplify it and put these things on her computer, like not only can we help her find it, like she can find it more easily, like but I
Mhm.
think like it was really hard because I think you had to go in and kind of just commit to what you had thought was going to be best. And then we kind of quickly realized
Yeah, it
that
was literally like a
it's
week
not
later that
the best.
well,
So
and it's
talk
so
about that. Like what were some of the things that you did and like what were some of the things that how she reacted?
well, like, one thing is, like, so she likes stationary stuff, and so she had just, like, little pins, little notepads all over in many boxes. Like, as anybody who's done a deep clean of your room knows, like, you just throw everything on the bed, then you make piles, and then you can make one box for stationery, for example. And then let's just say we're going through the stationery box, and I'm like, "All right, we're gonna go through this box." I have more boxes on the floor. One kinda like the old, what was it, TLC shows, like, where they had to go in, like, have, like, a throwaway, give to
Yeah,
Goodwill, a keep.
trading spaces.
Yeah, it was like that, like a mini version. So, like, I had a box for throwing away, like, just trash, because there was, miscellaneous trash in there too. A box for the Goodwill, and then a box for keeping. And I don't even think I think there was just 2 boxes, because if it was keeping, it was staying in the box that we had. And she was sitting there with me because I had to ask her, like, I didn't wanna make that decision for her, I wanted her to be involved, like, "Okay, what about this?" And of course, she wanted to keep everything, so it was a struggle for everything. I was like, "No, well, you already have 50 pens, like, what if we just give this one to the Goodwill?" But, like, I would say, "All right, well, we're both gonna go through here," and she kept putting the wrong one in the wrong thing. And I was like, "Mom, remember, this is the Goodwill one." "Right, right." And, like, the more we would do it, because it wasn't just, like, an hour of this, it was an all-day thing for a week. Like, I only had so much PTO time, and we had a lot of work to do, and every time you thought you were done with a box, another box would appear.
Yeah.
So, I was like, "We gotta keep going." And I didn't realize that, like, keep going for, like, an Alzheimer's patient just gets them more, like, I don't even know the
More
word.
fatigued, I think, like
Yeah,
cognitively
cognitively
fatigued.
fatigued. And
Yeah.
so she couldn't remember, and so then I was getting frustrated because I didn't know at the time, and
I remember that was hard because there's that dynamic, but there's also like the interpersonal dynamic with you guys and like mom likes to please you, right? So like she wants to
yeah,
spend the time with you and then she would have like emotional reactions, but then I could also tell that she was like trying to try to push down or ignore how she was feeling so that that you would feel happy with what you guys were accomplishing, which is also
just so
tough.
silly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and, like, I remember near the very end of it, because, like, again, like, there was even papers, literally a couch receipt from 1993 that I was like, "Mom, we need to throw this away." "No, you can't throw it away. What if the insurance needs it?" I'm like, "Mom, we don't even have this couch anymore." Like, it was things like that that was, like, it was very hard for her to, she was, like, emotionally attached to these papers.
I think that that is where we start to really see her mindset and her
Mhm.
exposure and like not understanding why you do the things you do, right? It's like
Exactly.
for her, it's just like she heard once, like you need to keep your taxes. And it's
Yeah,
like
she thinks it forever.
you can go to jail if you don't keep your copies of your taxes. Like,
Yeah.
same thing with receipts. Like, you have to have all your receipts. But to your point, you should be able to say, like, okay, well, I would no longer make an insurance claim on this. So I no longer need the receipt for that. It's like,
Yeah,
you
and
have
she
no
couldn't make that
option. She
connection
couldn't
of, like,
close
what to
that.
keep, what to not. She just knows it's just easier for me to know that I need to keep everything, and, like,
It's
at the
how
time, I
she
didn't
kind of
know why she
reacts.
thought that.
Yeah, but she reacts in such a way that it's like, it's not just a preference of I want to keep track for my own records. It's more of a emotional, like something bad will happen if I don't have this. And so it was
Mhm,
also really hard to make that make sense to somebody who has that belief. It's not just like a piece of information you could give them that then they update and then they can let it go. It's like for her, even though you would speak logic to her, she
mhm.
had that
She can't
belief
comprehend the
and
logic.
couldn't comprehend it.
Yeah,
Exactly. And I think
and
it feel, like, really good afterwards, like, she definitely
oh, yeah.
wanted it, like, cleared out,
Yes.
opened up and
She was
everything.
so happy.
Yeah, but, I mean, even
Mm.
afterwards, like well, I don't wanna cut off your story, but I was gonna say, like, even afterwards, I remember after you had flown home or even just maybe that week you were there staying, but, like, I think you had made a joke. You didn't mean anything by it, but, like, "Mom, you better, like, be keeping what is that piece of paper doing on your desk? Like trying to
Yeah,
kind of like keep her up. And
accountable.
she would kind of feel like she very quickly backslided back into her old
Yeah.
ways way faster than we could have ever anticipated.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because, like, near the end of that week, again, it was like a full-time job getting this it was just one, like, I guess 1.5 room was cleaned, but it I could tell, like, something I mean, we already knew something was wrong from the April trip, but there was a few other things that came to mind is, like, one, I told her, like, "Mom, you need to stop printing everything out. Like, look at what happened with all these boxes. Like, just save it as a PDF on your desktop. You can email it to yourself. Like, everything is digital now. I think we should move your printer to the basement. I'm not saying get rid of it. We can still have it set up, but the occasional time you need it." And like, that was her bottom line. No, F no. Like, it's staying in my room. And I was like, I didn't fight. Like, you know what? Like, I've had my own way a lot this week and getting her to change things. If this is her bottom line, fine. I think we met in the middle ground. We moved it to the living room. That way it's not in her bedroom and she maybe doesn't feel as compelled. But I thought that was just such a strong reaction to
Yeah.
this. And then, like, the other thing was, I don't remember exactly what it was, but we did something, and at the end, she just looks at me and she's like, You tricked me. You've been tricking me this whole week." And I just felt so blindsided because I've been very open and honest with her about everything we're doing, everything I'm throwing away. Like, I don't do things behind her back. And I was just so caught off guard by, like, the "you tricked me" thing. And I think that's very common for Alzheimer's later in the stages, but I think I had pushed her so much cognitively that, like, it kinda got to that point,
Yeah.
but,
Well,
like,
she
I was
didn't really
just
know what was
so
going on because
confused
she was masking a lot that week, right? Like she was acting like she knew what you guys were doing,
and
and
just
she
going along with it, and then
knew,
at
but
the
she
end,
was
she was like,
so
"Wait, where's
dumb.
all my stuff?" Like, I don't think she, like, put it together, but the whole time I was like, "What are you talking about? We've been doing this together this whole week. What do you mean I tricked you?" Like, I was just so confused by that.
Yeah, I remember that that was one of those again, like we have to have grace for ourselves because we didn't know we you only know what you know in the moment. Like truly almost a year later, it's very easy to look back on that and be like, we should never have done that. We should never
No. It was a
kind of
wasted week of PT.
yeah. But like, if it would have been 10 years prior, that would have been the exact right
Yeah.
thing, right? But like we didn't know what we know now. I will say like getting to that neuropsych evaluation that happened, I think it was a week after you left. So the appointment was on
Yeah.
at the end of May. You were back in Plattsburgh by that point. Like that definitely showed us a lot.
Yeah. So it was actually May 29th, 2025 that she went in for her neuropsych evaluation, at National Jewish in Denver,
Do you remember
and
do you remember that day very well?
I don't remember the day very well. Like, I remember more getting the results back than, like, the day she went in. And I do remember the day enough to where it was like a long test. It's not just like a 30-minute quick slums test or something. It was like an 8-hour thing. Like, they give you a lunch break and everything. And I think my mom said, like, "Can we skip the lunch break? Because I have to get home to my dog." Because I think
Yeah.
my dad was out of town at the time. So, like, by that time, she drove to National Jewish downtown by herself for this.
That's what really sticks out to me is I remember having a lot of anxiety about the fact that like again, like they had just timed it so poorly. Like here was this big test. Mom was by herself driving
Mhm.
downtown to National Jewish in Denver, Colorado for this. And like she was really anxious. She was anxious about like
Of
where to
course.
park. She was anxious about like going through the test.
Anyone would be.
She had a lot of nerves and like we were also a little bit I remember feeling worried that like how they were going to be able to interpret the test given like she had been kind of progressing to this point where like as her anxiety was a big topic that was coming up for us even while we were kind of sitting with all of this because she would see that as her anxiety would start to peak like she would have even lower verbal functioning and we were really
Mhm.
worried that like what if they can't get a good read on the test because of everything that was happening with her anxiety and her mental state at that time even though that they had been really focusing on dialing into her psychiatric medications it was still something that she was very nervous going into that appointment for sure. The results didn't come in for another week from the time that she went and actually had that test. And I think for all of us, there was an element of some anxiety. Like, of course, like we just said,
Suspense.
like Yeah, like, how
Is
is
it
this
ADHD? Is it Alzheimer's? Is it yeah, is it nothing? They say she's fine and
Yeah.
yeah.
And it was interesting because I think that if I remember this right, or maybe you can help me remember it, but I feel like there was this whole thing that happened where like we knew the results had come in, but we didn't know where to find them in her portal because at this point we had
Yeah.
never logged into mom's portal before. We didn't really have like associate accounts set up as like giving us access to things. And so my mom had said like, "Oh yeah, I got the message that like my results
Yeah.
came back." But we were like, "Oh, she's going to have another appointment in June to review them with her doctor." And so you and I were both pretty determined. We're like, "No, they have to be
Yeah, we
in
need to
here
find it.
now." And so I I remember it was like it was like almost a week later. It was early in June. Somehow you found them like in an evening, like on a weekday evening, a Thursday, maybe a Thursday or Friday evening. You found them. And I think both of us, like, I remember like my initial reaction, like a neuropsych evaluation, the results are not just like one line, it is
Mhm.
a long test. There are
And it's an
multiple
8-hour test.
categories.
They
They go
go into
through
detail.
your visual skills, your memory skills, your reading skills, your attention
Language,
skills. Yeah, language. There's so
motor.
many different sections. And so this was like a multi page summary. There was like a summary on top, and there was a lot of detailed information, like things that we didn't even expect to get, even around how she presented. Like it was
Mhm.
like she was on time. She was dressed appropriately because again, sometimes when people are coming in for these evaluations, like that can be a big part of it. Like if their buttons are messed up or if their shirt's not
Mhm.
backwards or things like that, it was clear that mom wasn't falling into that category.
Yeah, she looks put together
Yep, she looked put
and
together.
showed up on time.
Exactly. But it did highlight, like, even through that first part of the summary, that, like, even in her initial intake, just getting to know the person who was doing more of the intake portion of it, they noted that, like, she was pausing on her, things that we knew she would do, but, like, it was interesting to see how it would be described medically. Like, I think it said something like halting, word finding problems, like frequent pauses. Sounds like how I'm talking right now but different actually because and she would do that. Like she would have a very hard time trying to find her words. There'd be like almost like stuttering involved or just trouble finding her words, trouble making a fluent sentence. So that was interesting to see how all of that was kind of categorized into the summary. But after we're going to spend a little bit of time like kind of talking through some of the pieces of this neuropsych evaluation because it is truly what, like, secured the referral for the neurologist at that point and kind of fast tracked it as well, and it's also what started to have me feel, like, a lot more sure of what was coming down the road. Like, we didn't have the Alzheimer's diagnosis yet,
Mhm.
but it was the first, like, tangible piece of evidence that something was definitely going wrong, and I'm getting ahead of myself, but I do remember that after we got these results, it was pretty awkward. In hindsight, we probably should have been more delicate with how we like talked to mom about it and everything. But mom couldn't really even process the results of this. And it was hard for
Mhm.
us in real time to process what was in in this test and try to tell it to her. Like now in hindsight, I wish that we would have just really sat with it for a couple of days before we reviewed it with her. But at that time, I don't think we had any concept of that. Before I get too ahead of ourselves and how we process this afterwards, because I think we all had very different reactions to this, I just wanted to spend some time going through some of what we realized in the neuropsych evaluation. And I will also say this is something that I had to read several times because
Mhm.
it's almost like every little piece of it has a really important piece of information, right? Like I think especially in a test like this, like they're not just writing a novel for the novel's sake. Like every piece of this is something that is either an important piece of the puzzle that they are putting together to find their final summary. But I'll say and share straight from here some of the pieces that um we really had to go back with my dad and use over and over as evidence of why
Mhm.
we were so concerned. And I will say that again, that's why I think it's so important to read this very carefully because what I realized is that my dad could have picked pieces of this that made it seem less likely that she had Alzheimer's, and that I was
Mhm.
more focused on the pieces that kind of pointed to the fact that she might have Alzheimer's. And that's again why you have to have people who are engaged to actually read it from their own lens, because you're going to see things differently than how like somebody else is going to see them, from how another person is going to see them. And having everybody's eyes on it is not only going to help you support the person with the diagnosis, but it's also going to show you a lot about how the people on the care team are going to interpret things throughout the journey too. Because
Okay.
throughout this, like we've kind of talked about, it's been hard for my dad to really understand what is happening. And so I think that continued by the things that he noticed from this test. Anyway, pausing there, the piece that was most, that stood out the most to me is that there was a piece in, sorry. Okay. So, a couple of things that came directly from the summary that kind of struck us the most. It said that she was impaired across most domains, including auditory and visual attention, verbal and nonverbal reasoning, hypothesis testing, learning and memory for story like and list like verbal material, learning and memory for visual material, expressive language, including naming and fluency, visio-motor speed, visio-construction, and motor coordination bilaterally. When I read that list, I was like,
It's a lot.
wow. And it said right here, her current test results suggest moderate cognitive impairment.
Yeah.
This is a significant decline from her pre-morbid functioning. Like that's right there.
Confirmed that we're not being dramatic, that the test results show
Yeah.
something is wrong cognitively.
Right, and that's why I afterwards, again, it's hard to find the right way to talk to the person who is receiving all of this and having the decline, but it was like I wanted to really, I wish I could have gotten that really across to mom of like, this isn't your fault.
Yeah.
You're not just somebody who just has trouble functioning because that would be bad. It's just like you have lost your ability to do that. And it did say like she was in normal limits for receptive language and reading level, which is not like that much in terms of like the weight of it. And that's what I was trying to tell dad is like, dad was kind of stuck. I remember him feeling stuck on like, oh, that so she has some trouble with some reading or some like
It's
look.
words.
And I remember very clearly having to say to him, like, the next line of this, which is like, although this may contribute to aspects of this, he kept, sorry, dad kept bringing it back to her extremely high levels of anxiety. And he kept saying, this is
Mhm.
emotional. This is emotional. And I had to point this out and say, dad, it says right here in this paperwork, although the emotionality may contribute to aspects of cognitive dysfunction, her
Mhm.
cognitive difficulties were more global and more severe than what we might expect from emotional distress alone. And that was something that again, like one unfortunately, like one appointment can't tell an entire story, right? So from their perspective, they're like, she needs to go get with the neurologist now. And like there might need
Yeah.
to be tweaks. And depending on what the imaging says, then we might have to go back and do another test. Like they can't be 100% conclusive. But I think in mom's story, like it was pretty conclusive because what we know happened after this.
Yeah.
I will also say though that the part that like I remember because we got this less than a couple of weeks after you got back from your trip. And at the very bottom, it does like say some things that she might benefit from. It said she had difficulty with aspects of memory and would likely benefit from having new verbal information written down or printed out.
I
Like, oh
was
God.
like, "Oh my god."
It also says she may benefit from having checklists for day-to-day tasks,
Mhm.
schedule book for long-term appointments, and then it also like as suggested like speech therapy, which was important for us to kind of understand at that time as well. So again, we didn't know what we didn't know at that point. Like even just hearing that, we were like, wow, we're gonna have to think of this differently. But I mean, I remember how I felt when I got that neuropsych evaluation, but I like, Amber, do you remember, like, how you felt reading through it and, like, some of the days that followed? Like, how did you kind of process mom's results?
Uh, I think it was just more like like, I'm not saying that dad was gaslighting us by any means, but in a aspect, it kind of felt like that. Like, we'd say, like, "No, there's something wrong." He kept saying, "It's emotional, it's fine," like that tug of war. And so, like, it felt like finally, like, we have it listed from the doctors who he'll listen to that something is wrong, that she has the very minimum moderate cognitive impairment, and, like, that's something to work off of. And so, like, it kind of felt like a finally we have a ground to stand a leg to stand on to
What
get her what we need.
Yeah, true. It's funny though that even though you say that, it's like even when getting that leg to stand on, it felt like for that next month up until we actually got the results from the p-tau test, he still didn't get that. Like we would say, "Dad, she
Yeah.
has moderate cognitive
To this
impairment."
day, he still doesn't get it.
Would say, "Mild, mild," like
Yeah.
he would just see it how he wanted to see it.
Yeah, I think for weeks we had to bring up this thing again like you said, read out verbatim what the doctor said.
Yeah, I think I remember, like, forwarding it to him for, like, the 3rd time that
Yeah.
month and being like, I remember, Dad, if you're listening to this, I don't apologize, it's okay for you to know, but I remember we were having such I was in the car with him having such an intense discussion about this that I literally just had to turn the volume down and,
Yeah,
like,
I
give
remember that. We were coming back from
him
Vermont.
and I just had to turn the whole entire volume down and be like, "I'm
Just gonna
so
let
great."
him go
Yeah,
off.
like, mute him, like, and just
Yeah.
exactly, but I remember the outcome of that one being like, "Dad, I need you to actually read the results, like, not just
Just
interpret it,
him.
not skim it, sit down and read it," and
He's very smart. He should be able to sit down and
very
comprehend this.
well, and I do feel like after that, like, the next morning, like, he called me much calmer and was like, "Okay, I did read it. I see what you mean." Like,
Yeah, exactly.
I was
Well, and I one other thing the last thing I wanted to point out from this result was, like you already said, like the doctor concluded moderate cognitive impairment. She said, and flagged a progressive CNS disorder cannot be ruled out. And that which leads us to our next portion of they wanted to get an MRI of the brain.
Yep.
And do you remember what a CNS stands for? Central nervous system. That's what it
Yeah.
is. So that could be when we looked that up, that could be Alzheimer's. That could be I don't remember the other ones.
There was a list of a few, and it was different kinds of dementia, and then, of course,
Yeah.
like, there was the idea that, like, potentially, like, an MRI would show if, like, she had a tumor bumping into
Yeah.
that part of her brain or something like that, like, we didn't know.
Yeah, they basically said, "From this test, it's moderate cognitive impairment, that we can be certain, but we need to get an MRI, we need to get neurologist because something else cannot other things cannot be ruled out at this time,
Yeah.
so you need to go do those things." So, that brings us to I think they referred her to the MRI right
Well,
away.
so she went and got the MRI, and then it was June 18th, so about 2.5 weeks later that she met and reviewed the MRI with her PCP. Um
Oh, yeah, because they were reviewing the MRI and the neuro because they said, "Do both of these, we'll review them together at the next appointment."
Exactly. And so again, we were not at these appointments. So we're just kind of remembering like what mom and dad said about how the appointments went and then what the doctors wrote in the follow-up notes. When they reviewed the MRI and the neuropsych evaluation, this is what was written was no significantly alarming findings on the MRI, but we'll have neurology explain more at your upcoming appointment. So again, that makes sense. He's not a neurologist, he's not a brain doctor, right? So like
Yeah.
they're basically went through and were like,
No tumors,
no tumor,
no
no
brain
masses,
bleeds.
no
Yeah,
exactly, no, I don't know.
other
There's
things
other pieces.
with the brain.
We don't even know how to
We're not
yeah, we're
doctors,
not
clearly.
doctors. There wasn't like a trauma that had happened that was significant there. And so again, like this was kind of like the yo-yo that we were going on because it'd be like, okay, this neuropsych evaluation seemed like moderate cognitive impairment, can't rule out a central nervous system disorder, something like that. And then it'd be like, oh, well, the MRI was like not that bad. And that
Yeah,
mom and dad would kind of be like, see, nothing's wrong. See, everything is good. Like, we're just taking this one step at a time. And meanwhile, we're like, you guys are kind of missing what all of this is
it's
pointing to.
pointing to no obvious cancer, tumors, everything. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean it's not Alzheimer's or something
And again,
else.
keep in mind, like for our mom, like she was 61 at the time. So
Yeah.
this was, we kept thinking of that too. It's like, she's not going through this in her mid to late 80s.
Mhm.
She's in her early 60s. So that was kind of all leading up to this first appointment with a neurologist that was scheduled to happen at the end of June. Now, what was interesting is that my family was flying out to Denver for a trip in
Oh,
June.
yeah.
And so I was there from the 19th until the uh, 3rd of June. And it was a really quick trip. It was very fast. And I didn't have like any significant encounters with mom that were like massive lapses in judgment or anything. There
Well,
was,
I did from your trip.
okay.
Going back from May, remember we were trying to find the pavilion because it was like we were gonna have like an outdoor birthday party for Oliver. And you asked her like months prior, like, hey, like you're in Arvada, can you go check out some pavilions? Or I think you guys said you found one, and so she was supposed to go like reserve it or something. And when I get there, like, she was telling me like, yeah, like I can't find this place. Like we had to like search it and like I eventually found it and it was a little hard to find, but like I remember her like I think she was crying because she felt like so sad that she was like, I looked for it, like I couldn't find it and like she couldn't figure out how to reserve it online. Like and that now looking back
There
makes
was a
sense. But
mistake with it because like
oh, she reserved the wrong one, right?
that was I think that was my fault. That was I don't blame her for that, but, like, it was a little confusing because there was one that I wanted to get, and they both have, like, 2 different names, but one's
Oh
like
yeah,
a
it's the same
like,
name, but
and one
yeah.
so, ultimately, it ended up being okay, but you're right, there was, like, a whole confusion over that, and, like, it was really hard because, like, again, I'm very busy, I have a busy job, I have a young baby, like, life can be a little crazy. I Even though I'm very type A in certain ways, like those kind of planning things are not my super just because it more is overwhelming, not because I'm not capable of it.
Yeah.
So she really wanted to help. It was really hard for me to like kind of separate out like we are going through all of this stuff and like but you're saying you want to help me. Like how much do I let you step in? But then ended up
Mhm.
having to like I don't know. I feel bad. Like if mom ever listens to this, I'll feel bad because she really wants to help. Like she still wants to really be involved. Like nothing really stood out from that trip really. I mean, she seemed a little tired. She seemed like in pretty good spirits. Like I know she was happy to see me. I remember being worried about her. I remember she was telling like one of her good friends that she hadn't seen in like several years that had come to my our little birthday gathering for Oliver. She was telling her about some of the things that she was experiencing and the testing that she had been having. And that person was like, oh, I go through the same thing. I have
Uh-huh.
exactly the same stuff
I
going on.
forget words all the time too.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
so, that's good and also hard and part of the mix. But it was a couple days after I left that she actually met with the neurologist. And that 24 hours was the biggest, I think, whirlwind for us because,
Yeah.
I mean, do you want to kind of go into like what? Because I think you're the one who had the conversation with dad and mom about like how the appointment had gone.
I'm sure I did. I don't really remember. There's been so many appointments between then and now,
Yeah.
but I, can look at the summary that the first neurologist. So my mom and dad both went to the neurologist, and that's when they looked over the MRI, they looked over the neuropsych eval, and they took like, just a very, basic neurology appointment, like probably went over history.
Yeah, well, even looking at those notes, it's really interesting. I think it's worth pausing because you kind of start to see like the highest level of like what does he potentially think could be like
Mhm.
problematic or why does he feel like she's there and like they talk about things like Rosemary could not be trusted to hold the baby. And we're like,
Yeah.
that's not exactly how
Yeah.
you know?
But that's why we have to go to these appointments now because
Yeah, and, like, confusion around changing passwords. Yeah, that's true. Then it says no longer cooking much. I think that's an interesting interpretation also.
yeah.
But then it does have things like she has no issues with, like, keeping the stove on by mistake or letting the water run too long, which
Mhm.
is also true. And then it also said that, she's got a lot of anxiety. The husband
Mhm.
reports a lot of anxiety, and then it said, of note, there is great concern around the neuropsych evaluation after the patient was found to have a ninth grade reading level.
Which, we know that came with from my dad,
Yeah, that's
because
what
that was
I
the one thing that they
interpreted
said it's fine.
on that chart before we asked him to read it 3 times. Like that was
Yeah.
his understanding was like, okay, so she can't read as well. Like And then that was the only thing my mom took
Yeah.
from that report,
Because my
like,
dad kept saying it.
which is the well, I don't know if that's I think she probably latched on to something that she could understand. She doesn't know
Yeah,
what
true.
his, motor skills are. Like, I don't know if it's because
Mhm.
dad made that or if it's because I think it's probably a little bit of both. But it did also say, like, the image of the MRI, like, it appears to be in normal range for her age.
Mhm.
So then they left that appointment feeling like, well, nothing's wrong,
Well, they
right?
did the cognitive slums test there, and she got a 17 out of
Yeah.
30.
17 is like in a cognitive impairment range, right?
Yeah, I think it's mild or moderate impairment. But they said he did say here in the summary, like Rose met criteria for mild cognitive impairment, possibly dementia of the Alzheimer's type. And I think that's when they said, like, well, I think it's just mild cognitive impairment, but the FDA did just come out with a blood test called p-tau that will measure the amyloid plaque in the brain. Why don't we just draw some blood while you're here and see what those results are, and we can go from there.
Yeah, and it exactly. Again, these things are so important because you can read through this and still notice different things. Like, even now as I'm looking at this, like right before that part that you said, it says she definitely has enough abnormalities on her cognitive screener and her formal neuropsych testing to qualify for cognitive impairment. So, exactly. And again, this was on that night after the appointment because we got the results the next day. Dad and I went at it again on the phone because he was like, he goes, I am 99% sure her results are going to come back negative.
Yeah.
I am sure there is nothing wrong with her. And I said, Dad, kindly, like, how can you say that? I was not just wanting to be again, I don't wanna be right about this, and I had to tell him
Right.
that. I don't want to be right about this. I just don't want you to literally think there's nothing wrong when the rest of the picture is right in front of you. I have no attachment to if it comes back positive or negative. I don't want it to be positive. I just don't want you to be in denial about what's happening. That's the biggest thing. So, okay, so the next morning, the p-tau results came in.
Yeah, and we briefly went over this in episode 1, but we'll kinda dig a little deeper into it now. We get the results much quicker than we thought. It was literally the next morning, 7 AM. I had to go to work, but I woke up and checking my emails, and I saw because by that point, we set me and you up as, like, basically, mom would be a dependent on our health my health chart or whatever. So that way, if she gets test results or messages from the doctor, anything goes to my email because it's just easier
Can
for
have
us to
full
get it.
visibility.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it said, Rosemary, you have a test result available. And I knew that was the only test result we were waiting for. So my heart starts racing and I click on it and I'll put a screenshot up here for anyone watching on YouTube. But for anyone listening, the values for positive were 0.18. Her blood results came back at a 1.11. So like basically off the chart. And I remember I think it was about 8 seconds after finding out that I ran to Felicia's room and like knocked and just opened the door. I think I said, she has it. And you were
Yeah.
like, what? Like you just woke up and I was like, she has it. We just got the results.
Yeah. I
And then
sat
I think you're
with
like, oh
her.
my God. I think you just sat up and just kept saying, oh my God. And then I handed you my phone, I think.
Yeah. Then I looked at it and I was shocked by like you see, the visual that you've obviously put up, but like you see the little green and then you see the rest of the bar and then you see where she was and you're just like, and then you just start thinking like, what does this mean? How am I going to tell her what does this mean?
Yeah.
Like
I
you,
Just like a million questions going through your head at once. Like, where do we go from here?
yeah.
How is dad gonna accept it finally?
And that was the other thing I was so worried about is like, again, I have his voice in the back of my head. I am 99% sure it's not Alzheimer's. And here it is. What we were felt was pretty conclusive. Now, I will say, we didn't know what this test really was. It's not like we spent the whole night being like, okay, let's research this p tau test and like how
Yeah.
effective it is or anything. And so after we got the results, I think you and I kind of split into two different undefined at that time, like roles where like you started to research what did that test really mean and like how is there such thing as like a false positive or a
Or
false
any other disease that you can
the other
have if this is
exactly.
positive.
And then I kind of like the direction of talking to mom and dad and telling them about it. And I think in hindsight, again, that was not something we planned. We didn't sit down and say, like, hey, you call dad or you tell him, like,
I know, I wish I would have been there with you
I
because I
know.
think I was in meetings and stuff, and you were like, "I called dad, I think you couldn't help yourself." You were like, "I have to."
I couldn't help myself. I remember I'm sitting in this exact same chair where I called him from. Like I had started my work day and I couldn't hold it in. I was like, I have to tell him, like he has to understand and know. I again, nobody teaches you how to do this. Like I don't know how much better it would have been if like all of us could
We
have sat
scheduled a
down on a board
meeting
and like,
and
okay, like
yeah,
who's gonna check for the results? What should happen once we receive those results? Should we all
yeah, we
read
didn't
it
even think about
together?
it because they were so like, "It's not gonna come back with anything," so, like, I don't even think they would have
And
scheduled or had
I
that
don't even
conversation.
think that we would have thought we would have got it that early in the morning either.
Yeah,
I think we thought we had more time to probably figure out what that looked like. And so we were all just kind of doing
caught off guard.
whatever we thought felt normal in that moment. But yeah,
Yeah.
I looking back, like, I wish I would have had you there too, and like we could have talked to dad together. It was a quick call. Like I think it was like 9-ish here, and so it would have been like 7 a.m. there, and I just called dad, and I was like, it's hard to remember because I didn't write down exactly what happened, and it was obviously so stressful. I think I just said, "Hey, dad,
I
I've
have
got
some
to."
bad news or yeah, I have to
Yeah,
tell you something.
something, and he was like, "What? What is it?"
Okay.
And Amber was able to get the test results already from the test that determined if she had Alzheimer's. Well, let me pause for a second. They didn't even know what the test results were going to show.
Yeah.
We said we had talked this this is gonna come so out of order, and we apologize, listeners, because I think we're organized sitting down to do this, and then we remember pieces of this as we talk. But coming out of that appointment, we were like, "So what's the next step? Like, how?" Because this was before we read Dr. S's summary ourselves, and they were like, "Well, they took some blood work, and that's it." And we're like, "Blood work for what?" We're like, "What
Yeah.
do you mean blood work? Like, they're gonna test her. I don't
That's
know."
why I had to look up what the p-tau test was because they didn't
You
even
didn't even
tell
know what it
us.
was called until you saw
Yeah,
the
exactly.
neurologist notes and then saw what it was. So when I remember talking to mom about it that night and saying, like, I was trying to be really calm with her and like being like, so this test is going to tell you if you have Alzheimer's or not. And she was like, what?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can do that
She
from a
was
blood
just
test? Like
told
she
to
was like,
take some blood while she was there.
her impression was so strong that that nothing was wrong with her and that it wasn't even a real option. I don't know. Again, we weren't at the appointment, so we don't know if that was just their interpretation and like revising in the car together, like, oh, yeah, it's definitely nothing. Or if the doctor genuinely seemed dismissive of it and just was like, we don't
Well, what
know.
Doctor S said was he would be surprised if it was Alzheimer's because usually there's people don't have this much emotions with Alzheimer's. Like it's atypical. So that's why he was thinking like we're going to test for this because again, like the neuropsych test, it can't be ruled out. Like we want to do every test we can to figure out what this is. But like I think he was surprised and I think that's probably again, we weren't there, but that's probably what mom and dad latched onto is, oh, it's again, dad hears it's emotional.
Yeah.
Dr. S agrees
Yeah.
we'll do this test, to make sure, but it sounds like it's just emotional. We need to get her emotions under control, quote unquote.
Exactly. So I remember calling dad and I just said, "Dad, look, she has it. She has Alzheimer's, this test." And I kind of described the picture to him. I was like, "I'll have Amber send you the paperwork." Like I described like how she was at a 1.11 out of point zero
818.
point 0.818 point
No, 0.18.
0.18
Yeah.
exactly. So he just was like, "My God." And I remember like just hearing how sad he was and like
No, he has to tell her.
I don't remember if we talked about like how he was going to tell her. I don't remember if I literally I think I kind of blocked it out. Like I don't believe that like he said like, "Oh, I'm going to go talk to her." And I might have said like, "Are you going to tell her? Like how are you going to tell her? Will you
Do you
guys
want
keep us
me to
posted?
tell her?
We have a call tonight." Like I remember saying like we all need to get on a call together because I think we all did do a FaceTime later that
Yeah,
afternoon
after work.
after work. And like it was clear like mom had been crying all day.
Oh, yeah. She was still crying when we talked to her later.
Yeah, exactly. She was very emotional, of course. Like, how could, and we just told her that, like, Mom, of course you're sad about this. Like, this is devastating.
It's
This
her
is
worst
this is
nightmare.
devastating for all of us. Like, we cannot believe this has happened. And, you know, there's also a piece of it that we're kind of like, does any part of you feel like at least you have a reason why this has been happening to you? Like, not relieved, that's not the right word, but like,
Like, stop blaming yourself like it's a disease.
exactly, like, you didn't choose for this to happen to you. But that, I mean, that really marks the end of the not knowing.
Mhm.
That's why we wanted to take the time to really walk through everything that led up to this moment, because, like, from that moment that you get that diagnosis, that's like the end of one chapter, and then the beginning of a brand new chapter, which is another what the rest of this podcast is going to be about, right? Because it's like, what happens once you know? Like, we've learned so much about, like, brain health and what contributes to cognitive decline, and what are our chances of getting this same disease. And, like, we have had to sit with so many pieces that we never could have prepared ourselves for in all of the months leading up to this, or that we didn't know to prepare ourselves for.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot, but I'm excited to now that we've gotten to this point to kinda go over more episodes about where she is now because 'cause it's been a year, and a lot more of, like, the educational pieces that we've found, and
Yeah, I
we'll
will say, I won't go into this in more detail, but I will say, like, there are, like, as devastating as that diagnosis was, there are positive things that came from that diagnosis, because as you've heard us talk about, like, several trips that we've experienced of her coming back here to visit us, the next time that she came back once she had that diagnosis, I will say
Yeah.
she was much better. Like,
Yes.
we were able to interact with her differently. She was able to anticipate things differently. And, like, I really think, like, what really changed afterwards is, like, she didn't have to mask as much.
Yeah. She knew something was wrong and we just adapted. And we also weren't as frustrated because when you don't know why somebody's acting that way, of course you're going to feel frustrated. You know how somebody usually acts and they're not acting that way or not showing up the way you think they were or are supposed to. But like now it's not a big deal. It's like she has Alzheimer's. Like we just like, oh
Right.
yeah, I'll answer your question 3 times. Like I'm
Yeah.
not frustrated by that. It's a disease.
Right. And it's funny, Amber, because, like, I think back to, like, that training spaces exercise of, like, keep, throw away, donate, right?
Yeah.
Like, now if we were to do that, like, then that was a very normal activity. You put this in this bucket, you put this in this bucket.
Yeah.
Now if we did it, we'd just be like, okay, what's the trash? And, like, you just focus on that one thing
Yeah.
because you don't have that ability to hold space for two.
Yeah, exactly. So like everything that we or even when we and we'll probably talk about this in a later episode, like when we planned our trip for Disney World for January of this year, like we discussed like how do we plan for breaks for mom? Like how do we make things, with Alzheimer's like sensory, like things get just more disoriented than your like a typical cognitive brain would work. And Disney World is a very loud and unpredictable
Stimulating.
environment. Yes, very stimulating. So we had a lot of leading up to that. Like, what is that going to look like? How's mom going to react? Do we need to have a plan for like the fireworks? Like, I'm going to take her back to the hotel because it's getting late and she wants needs to go to bed early. Like, there's a lot that even went into like simple things like that. That like it
It
takes over
just
your life.
It's changed how we interpret and how we approach every single day. So, yes, again, thank you guys for joining us for today. Sorry for some of the ups and downs of winding and unwinding this story, but we really appreciate sharing it with you. And we are grateful to hopefully have this community and this platform that people are realizing that, like, they're not alone in their own experiences of this, and also just like some of the complications that it's very normal to go through because you're navigating an area that you had no training on, no planning. Like, you're doing the best you can.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And we'll talk to you next week. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
If this episode resonated with you, or if someone you love is navigating an Alzheimer's diagnosis, please know you don't have to fight it alone. The Alzheimer's Association is a free 24/7 resource available to anyone who needs their support. Whether you're newly diagnosed, deep in caregiving, or just trying to understand what comes next. You can reach them anytime at 1-800-272-3900. You can also reach them online at alz.org.